It started with a simple premise, a mirror that didn't just reflect, but remembered. Yet, when the Boogey Man arrived in 1980, that premise began to warp into something far stranger than the filmmakers ever penned. Audiences weren't disturbed by the supernatural plot. They were unsettled by the sensation that the camera had captured moments it was not supposed to witness. Reflections that lingered a heartbeat too long, shadows that behaved as if they had their own timing, and scenes that felt less performed than observed. What was meant to be a modest horror production carried the quiet tension of something watching from inside the frame. Director Uli Lommel insisted the film followed a straightforward genre blueprint, but the production refused to move in straight lines. Equipment malfunctioned only when pointed at the mirror. Light meters flickered with readings that made no physical sense. Crew members began to avoid standing directly in front of the glass, as though proximity alone invited something unwelcome. And when early cuts circulated, whispers followed. Certain scenes appeared too real, not because of practical effects, but because the images felt as if they originated from a place beyond the physical set. A few blamed damaged reels, others blamed imagination, but none could explain the consistency of the unease. Decades later, the strangeness hasn't faded. If anything, time has sharpened the questions. Why do versions of the film differ in ways no archive can verify? Why do restored frames reveal details missed in the original prints? And why does the mirror, an ordinary prop, by all accounts, remain the only object from the shoot surrounded by conflicting testimonies? These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about the Boogey Man. Fact 1. The mirror was never meant to command the production, yet from the first day on set, it behaved like the only object that understood it wasn't just a film. Originally, the crew treated it as a simple supernatural prop, a device to anchor the story's central haunting. But the moment lights were tested, something felt off. Reflections appeared unusually crisp, as if the glass responded to the actor's presence rather than the lighting grid. Subtle streaks emerged only when someone stepped into frame, disappearing the instant they moved away. The prop master cleaned and recalibrated, convinced it was residue or lens distortion, but the markings returned exclusively during emotional scenes. Even adhesives refused to cooperate. Gels and filters slipped off as though repelled by the surface. Some crew members joked the mirror had preferences, but the humor faded quickly. More than one grip admitted they felt watched when standing near it, as if the glass held depth beyond its physical thickness. By the end of the first week, no one called it a prop anymore. They simply called it the thing we try not to face. Fact 2. The first major interruption in production didn't come from actors or equipment. It came from the mirror breaking long before the scene required it. The shattering was scripted, carefully planned, and rehearsed with pre-scored safety glass. But during the actual take, the mirror fractured violently without being touched. A sharp diagonal crack split across the surface, startling the entire crew. The actor hadn't reached his mark. The camera hadn't even completed its initial pan. When sound playback was reviewed, a faint exhale appeared half a second before the break, a breath positioned impossibly close to the microphone. No one claimed to have made the sound. The room had been silent. The engineer replayed it multiple times, noting that the breath carried a resonance unlike anyone on set. Replacement glass was brought in, yet the unease lingered. The director debated reshooting the moment, but sensed the crew's reluctance to recreate something that felt spontaneously wrong. In the final cut, the break reads as intentional, but the footage preserves a moment no one willingly staged. Fact 3. What truly unsettled the production wasn't the broken mirror, it was the figure that appeared during playback, a figure no one saw in the room. The filmed moment seemed routine. The actor approached, paused, then stepped aside. Nothing unusual occurred, but in the dailies, a faint silhouette stood behind him in the reflection. Tall, still, and positioned in a way that contradicted the camera's line of sight. The operator swore the space behind the actor had been empty. Continuity notes confirmed no crew member occupied that area. When the team enlarged the frame, the distortion behaved unnaturally, bending inward toward the actor rather than outward like a lens artifact. Suggestions ranged from accidental double exposure to warped stock, but none fit the geometry of the shot. The simplest solution was to cut the moment entirely, yet the director insisted on preserving the take, cropping just enough to obscure the anomaly. Still, those who watched the raw footage agreed on one thing: the silhouette wasn't reacting to the actor, it was reacting to the camera. Fact 4. The first major continuity dispute arose not from sloppy editing, but from a single take that disobeyed every physical rule the crew relied on. The scene required nothing complicated. The actors moved around the mirror while the reflections simply followed as expected. Yet in one take, the reflections moved a fraction of a second ahead of the actors themselves. The discrepancy was subtle, but unmistakable. When examined frame by frame, the mirror seemed to anticipate the actor's gestures, a turn of the head, a shift in posture before the physical movement occurred. The cinematographer ran through every technical possibility: film roll tension, shutter lag, lens misalignment. Nothing accounted for the effect. Multiple retakes produced perfect continuity, making the anomaly even more inexplicable. Some crew members theorized that the actors unintentionally hesitated, but the playback proved otherwise. Their bodies lagged behind their reflections with unnerving consistency. The director eventually used the original take, calling its uncanny timing a gift. But privately, the editor admitted the unsettling truth. It looked as though the reflected world acted first, and reality followed half a beat later. Fact 5. The sound crew's strangest encounter happened during a task so routine it should have produced absolute silence, collecting room tone. They dimmed the lights, covered reflective surfaces, and instructed everyone to remain still, yet a faint tapping emerged only seconds into the recording. It wasn't random, it possessed rhythm, like someone drumming lightly against a pane of glass. The engineer halted the take, convinced it was ambient interference or faulty equipment. But even after swapping microphones and repositioning cables, the tapping persisted, moving closer each time, as if responding to the boom operator's adjustments. When they reviewed the waveform, they noticed something impossible. The frequency pattern resembled the acoustic signature of shattering glass, elongated and slowed. The crew searched the set for loose fixtures or rodents, finding nothing. No one admitted to hearing the tapping during the recording, yet the microphones captured it clearly, steady, deliberate, almost patient. The engineer erased the take from the official log, but kept a personal copy he later vowed never to play again after dusk. Fact 6. The most heavily debated cut in the film wasn't removed for gore or pacing. It was removed because no one could explain the face that appeared in it. In the original sequence, a character leans close to the mirror, and the glass ripples subtly, as though reacting to his breath. No visual effects were used. The production lacked the equipment for such manipulation. But when the footage was screened, a second visage emerged beneath the actor's reflection, faint, contoured, and looking upward from behind the glass. Editors isolated the frame, expecting damaged stock or pressure marks, yet the rest of the reel showed no blemishes. Every adjacent frame behaved normally. Only that moment contained the distortion. Labs were consulted. Theories ranged from chemical contamination to accidental double printing. None fit the evidence. Quietly, the studio removed the shot from several international releases to avoid scrutiny. What remained unspoken was the part no technical report could address. The face did not resemble any performer, crew member, or known artifact of the filming process. Fact 7. The most controversial censorship issue surrounding the film emerged not from violence, but from a sequence that looked too controlled to be a special effect. In this scene, shards of the broken mirror trail a fleeing character through a hallway, moving with a precision that unsettled European review boards. Unlike wire-guided effects common at the time, the shards shifted direction mid-air, almost adjusting their course in response to the actor's movement. When officials demanded documentation of the rigging, the production had nothing to show: no photographs, no sketches, no notes describing wire placement or stunt choreography. And when the negative was inspected, the reflections on the shards didn't match the actor's position in the scene. Instead, they showed a darker shape, occupying a space no crew member had stood in. Several reviewers refused to certify the print until the shot was trimmed, labeling it biomechanically improbable, a phrase rarely seen in censorship reports of the era. Internally, one inspector summarized the problem more bluntly. The footage behaved as if something inside the mirror, not the crew, controlled the motion. Fact 8. The production's child actors encountered something the adults never witnessed directly, and their reactions altered the course of filming. During rehearsals, they were asked to stare into the mirror and hold still, allowing the camera to capture their tension. But before the take began, both children stepped backward in unison, insisting someone was behind the glass. One described a flattened face pressed outward, as though trying to breathe through the surface. The crew dismissed this as nerves, yet the first official take dissolved into chaos. Mid-scene, both children abruptly turned toward an empty corner of the room, eyes wide, reacting to movement no one else perceived. A sudden draft swept across the set despite the sealed windows, sending scripts fluttering off a nearby table. Attempts to redo the scene failed. The children trembled violently each time they approached the mirror. Production rewrote the sequence, minimizing the children's proximity to the reflective surface. Years later, when asked what frightened him most, one child offered a simple explanation. He felt the mirror wasn't observing the characters, it was studying the audience through them. His comment was dismissed as imagination, though no adult present that day forgot the look in his eyes. Fact 9. The editing room encountered an anomaly that defied every technical explanation they attempted, an anomaly that seemed to shift between viewings. During post-production, a hallway shot involving the mirror displayed a faint internal glow, pulsing softly in the reflection. At first, editors assumed inconsistent lighting, but the walls and the actor's shadow remained perfectly stable, suggesting the glow originated from within the glass itself. When the reel was screened again hours later, the glow appeared earlier in the shot, as if the effect were repositioning itself. Equipment logs confirmed nothing had been altered. When the footage was digitized, the glow changed yet again, now brighter, more centralized, and responding subtly to frame-by-frame slowing. A colorist attempted to isolate the anomaly, but found that the brightness curve behaved unlike overexposure, resembling instead a light source behind the glass bending through an uneven medium. The team cataloged the event as an unstable optical artifact, though privately, several editors admitted the glow felt reactive, almost aware of being observed. Their final note captured the unease plainly. This isn't a lighting issue, it's a presence. Fact 10. The mirror did not end up in its final filming room because of artistic intent. It ended up there because every other location refused to function when it was present. Originally, the director planned to stage the major supernatural scenes in a spacious, well-lit room designed for safe stunt execution. But each lighting test collapsed into inexplicable technical failures. Bulbs blew instantly, light meters fluctuated wildly, and on one occasion the generator shut down without triggering a single breaker. Electricians inspected every circuit, finding nothing amiss. Out of frustration, the crew relocated to a cramped secondary room that no one had seriously considered. The moment the mirror was placed there, all equipment behaved flawlessly. Reflections stabilized, camera lenses stopped fogging, and audio captured without distortion. The cinematographer noted that the room's narrow proportions seemed to funnel attention toward the mirror, whether intended or not, giving it an unnatural dominance in every frame. Crew members joked that the object had chosen its environment. But the detail no one could ignore was this. Once filming wrapped and the mirror was removed, the original spacious room returned to perfect working order, as though the failures had followed the mirror, not the machinery. Fact 11. One of the production's most unsettling incidents involved a crew member with no role in the scene, someone who simply happened to be standing where the mirror could see her. She was monitoring continuity from behind a doorway, watching an actor move across the room. Nothing about the take seemed unusual until she suddenly gasped, breaking the shot. She explained that the mirror's reflection shifted independently, as if something behind the glass repositioned itself. The director dismissed it as nerves, yet the woman refused to remain near the doorway afterward. To verify her claim, editors pulled the footage. The scene looked normal at first glance, but a faint distortion hovered behind the actor for a split second, a blur shaped like an upright figure leaning slightly toward the camera. It wasn't a lens flare, nor a crew shadow, nor a smudge on the negative. It appeared, reacted, and vanished. The woman never returned to set, leaving her clipboard and notes behind. Her parting comment, quietly delivered to the script supervisor, was the unnerving thread that stayed with the crew. It wasn't looking at him, it was looking past him. Fact 12. During early test screenings, audiences reported a reaction the studio had never encountered before. Not fear, but recognition. Viewers described a strange familiarity in scenes dominated by the mirror, as though they had seen the compositions before in dreams or memories they couldn't place. One attendee swore he remembered the exact choreography of a shot despite never having watched the film. Another insisted the mirror's shattering felt like a replay of something she had lived through. The studio attributed these responses to suggestion, but the reports accumulated in unnerving consistency. The sensation occurred only during long, static shots where the mirror occupied the center of the frame. Psychologists consulted by the marketing team labeled the effect pareidotic memory, a reflex where the mind assigns meaning to ambiguous imagery. But this didn't account for multiple viewers describing the same non-existent detail, a momentary ripple inside the glass just before a character reacted. The director denied inserting subliminal elements, pointing out the limited budget and straightforward production. Still, the impression persisted. The mirror did not feel like a prop, but like an echo, projecting something the audience already carried within themselves. Fact 13. The movie's cult status did not rise from nostalgia or rediscovery. It rose from viewers who claimed the film quietly altered itself over time. When The Boogey Man began circulating on late-night television, audiences reported inconsistencies that no broadcast technician could verify. Some insisted certain mirror scenes were longer than in the theatrical release. Others swore a hallway reflection shifted positions or lingered with a weight that hadn't been there before. These claims sparked informal comparison screenings among horror enthusiasts. Projectionists placed 16mm prints beside taped broadcasts, expecting minor distortions. Instead, arguments erupted. Several viewers described a red glint in the mirror that no reel contained. Others pointed to micro-pauses in the actors' movements, claiming the timing had subtly changed. Archivists re-examined the prints and confirmed their integrity. No additional frames, no edits, no discoloration. The unsettling pattern was this: the discrepancies always occurred in shots where the mirror dominated the frame. Projectionists described these scenes as pulling forward, as though the footage tried to reassert itself differently depending on who watched and when. The debates never resolved, but one conclusion echoed across fan circles: the movie didn't just play, it responded. Fact 14. Among the strangest items recovered from the production files was a handwritten note that seemed to describe events no one had yet experienced. The note surfaced inside a misfiled folder of lighting plans. A single sentence scrawled in rushed handwriting: "Never face it directly, it learns you." The handwriting belonged to a crew member who quit abruptly during the first week of shooting. What made the message disturbing wasn't the warning itself, but its timestamp. It predated the mirror's first documented malfunction and long before any of the crew reported discomfort around the prop. Further searches uncovered 2 additional notes on unrelated diagrams. Angles matter more than light, and it shifts when unattended. None of these comments aligned with the technical troubles that occurred later, yet they predicted them with eerie precision. Former co-workers recalled the writer as calm, methodical, hardly inclined to superstition. But the specificity of the warnings and their anticipation of incidents, still weeks away, suggested he witnessed something before anyone realized the production's tone had changed. Fact 15. The crew's most whispered experiences involved moments the cameras never captured, flashes of movement inside the mirror during periods of complete stillness. These incidents occurred between takes, when the set was quiet and the lighting rig powered down. Crew members reported quick sparks of light inside the mirror, not reflections but bursts that seemed to originate from behind the surface. One grip described seeing a tall, narrow figure illuminated for less than a second before disappearing as though swallowed. Another claimed the light behaved like a pulse, expanding and contracting irregularly. None of these episodes appeared in official footage, but a fragment of unlogged film emerged years later in a dusty storage box. A few seconds of the mirror filmed from a fixed angle, displaying a faint internal bloom of brightness not caused by any visible source. Archivists ran frame-by-frame examinations and found the light rising from a central point, forming a contour before dissolving. No record existed of who shot the clip, and no one could determine why the mirror glowed only when no one intended to film it. Fact 16. The studio's legal concerns intensified when they reviewed a scene that should have been impossible to film without elaborate stunt coordination, yet no such coordination existed. In the sequence, a character is yanked backward across the floor, dragged several feet with shocking precision. Normally, such a stunt would require visible harness work or complex wire rigs, but the footage contained none of the usual giveaways. No tension lines, no uneven body movement, no sudden jerks caused by imperfect pulls. When legal auditors requested the stunt documentation, nothing surfaced. Not a checklist, not a rehearsal log, not even a receipt for rigging equipment. The stunt coordinator denied involvement entirely. The actor insisted he had no memory of performing the movement. And when investigators returned to the location, The wooden floorboards bore no marks, despite the deep grooves visible in the scene. Optical effects were proposed, but budget records proved no such techniques were available. The internal legal note, never meant for public eyes, summarized the issue bluntly. The motion appears neither human-driven nor mechanically assisted, source indeterminate. Fact 17. One of the most baffling artifacts in the film's history emerged decades later, a reel containing alternate footage that fit nowhere in the production timeline. Discovered by a private collector, the reel featured scenes nearly identical to the final cut, yet subtly wrong. The actor in one take moved with a delayed rhythm, as though reacting to cues unheard by the crew. In another, the mirror's surface appeared unnaturally dark, swallowing ambient light instead of reflecting it. The most disturbing clip showed the actor pausing mid-performance, slowly lifting his eyes toward the camera with an expression not found in any script notes. There were no clapperboard frames, no audio logs, no production identifiers. Chemical examination confirmed the stock was authentic to 1980, but the footage had never passed through the editing department. Those who viewed the reel described an uncanny sensation. The scenes felt familiar, yet misaligned, like echoes from a version of the film that was never officially made. The troubling implication was that someone or something filmed these sequences outside the documented shoot. Fact 18. Among all the abnormalities found during post-production, the temporal distortion in the film's edge codes remains the most quietly unsettling an error that should not be possible. While reviewing composite shots, the editor noticed that the exposure timestamps printed along the film's edge preceded the clapperboard cues by several seconds. These codes are mechanical, imprinted during exposure. They cannot appear earlier unless the film received light before the camera began rolling. At first, the editor suspected lab contamination or faulty processing, but the anomaly occurred exclusively in scenes involving the mirror and always by the same 2 to 4 second gap. Controlled tests with fresh film rolls showed no such discrepancy. When the editor compared timestamps to crew logs, an eerie pattern emerged. The mismatched exposures aligned with moments when crew members reported cold drafts, pressure shifts, or the sensation of being watched. No one formally documented the connection, but annotations scribbled in the margins of editing sheets hinted at the discomfort. It's as if the shot begins before we press record. Fact 19. The most unexpected discovery during the film's restoration came from an element no one thought would carry anomalies: the silence itself. When sound engineers digitized the optical track, they noticed irregular pulses nestled in the noise floor during scenes dominated by the mirror. Initially presumed to be mechanical flutter, the pulses repeated with a biological regularity. Spectral analysis revealed waveforms resembling slow, deliberate inhalations, the kind produced when someone stands very close to a microphone, even though no such setup was used. Stranger still, the pulses aligned perfectly with faint shifts of light inside the mirror, as if the audio captured something reacting in tandem with the reflection. Engineers checked for equipment interference, scanning each frequency band for mechanical origins. None matched. The anomaly persisted across multiple prints, even those processed at different laboratories. Attempts to isolate the sound only deepened the mystery. Time-stretched versions revealed a low, rhythmic pattern that suggested intent rather than accident. The restoration report described it clinically, but one line stood out. The presence seems to breathe only when the mirror is centered. Fact 20. The film's most disturbing artifact surfaced not in the studio archives, but in the hands of a collector who purchased a mislabeled reel at an estate sale. Expecting discarded footage, he instead uncovered several minutes of unbroken film, showing the mirror alone in a dim room. No actors entered, no cues were given. The camera didn't pan or adjust focus, it simply watched. For 2 minutes, nothing changed, until the reflection gradually darkened, as though shadows were gathering within the glass. A faint shape emerged, moving closer with each passing second, yet no corresponding movement existed in the actual room reflected behind it. When analyzed frame by frame, the motion appeared consistent, purposeful, even cautious. The reel ended abruptly mid-approach, with no leader, no slate, and no indication of who operated the camera. What troubled archivists most was that the angle of the shot matched no known camera position from the production. It looked as though someone or something had filmed the mirror from a vantage point no crew member ever occupied. Bonus fact: During an archival survey decades after the film's release, a researcher uncovered a thin, unmarked envelope containing pages that should not have existed within the chronology of The Boogey Man. Inside were typed scenes labeled as early drafts, yet they described events that occurred long after production had wrapped incidents documented only in restoration notes and private interviews from years later. The pages referenced mirror flickers recorded during digital transfers, alternate reels found in private estates, and sound anomalies no one noticed until the film underwent preservation. Each page bore a date from 1979, preceding all of the anomalies by a full year. Laboratory tests confirmed both the ink and paper were authentic to the era, eliminating any possibility of a modern forgery. The handwritten annotations were even more unsettling. Some notes resembled technical comments, but others read like warnings directed at the future crew. Cover it after every take, avoid direct alignment, and it responds to attention. The handwriting matched that of a production assistant who mysteriously resigned early in the shoot and avoided all public commentary. Thereafter, attempts to question him years later produced no clarity. He denied writing anything but refused to view the pages. Yet the final sheet in the envelope defied all explanation. It contained no ink, but beneath angled light, faint indentations formed sentences pressed into the fibers from an unseen source. The imprint read, "You captured only the part that allowed itself to be seen." If you've stayed through every fragment of this story, you've seen how the boogeyman leaves more unresolved threads than answers. But among all these strange details, the altered timestamps, the unlogged reels, the mirror that behaved as if it had its own intentions, which one feels the hardest to dismiss? Tell us in the comments whether you think these incidents were technical accidents or signs of something the production never understood. And if there's another film whose hidden corners you want us to uncover next, let us know. The deeper the mystery, the further we're willing to follow it.